At Gate 47 of JFK International Airport, a German Shepherd K9 suddenly broke his posture. His ears snapped forward, tail stiff, and in one terrifying burst of sound, he lunged. The leash went taut in his handler's hand. A scream rang out. Little girl in a sparkly pink hoodie dropped her teddy bear. Her mother gasped. Her father stepped protectively in front of them as the dog barked louder, refusing to back down. People stopped boarding. Phones went up. Security radios crackled, and just like that, every eye in Terminal 4 was locked on one family, and the dog that wouldn't let them leave. Before we begin the story, we kindly invite you to take a moment to like the video, share it to spread the love, and subscribe to Heroes for Animals, so you won't miss the next heartwarming stories. Thank you for being with us. It was supposed to be a normal departure. Flight 298 to Madrid. Departure, 11:20 a.m. Gate, 47A. The McAllister family blended in like anyone else. Father mid-40s, button-up shirt still wrinkled from the cab ride in. Mother early 30s, slight pale with dark circles under her eyes. And a little girl around 6 years old, dragging a wheeled unicorn backpack and clutching a well-loved brown teddy bear with one button eye. Officer Ben Cortez, the K9 handler on duty, had already clocked 3 hours patrolling near international gates. Atlas, his 4-year-old German Shepherd, was one of the best in the program. Sharp, disciplined, trained to detect narcotics, explosives, and even certain types of currency. But in the past few months, Atlas had started to act differently. Sensitive, alerting in weird ways. Ben had chalked it up to fatigue, maybe early burnout. It happened, but what happened at 10:48 a.m. was something else. Atlas had been sitting calmly near the row of terminal benches when the McAllister family walked past. Suddenly, he surged forward like a missile, growling, barking, his body low, tail stiff, gaze locked, not on the father or the bags, but on the child. Ben yanked the leash back hard. Atlas, heel. But the dog wouldn't relent. He barked with urgency, scratching at the floor. He stepped sideways to block the family's path to the boarding line. Passengers began to murmur. Is there a bomb? Did they find drugs? The McAllisters froze. The father raised both hands, wide-eyed. Sir, we're just trying to get on our flight, he said, voice shaking. We've got nothing. Ben didn't reply. His focus was on Atlas, who now sniffed toward the girl's teddy bear, then backed, up growling again. A second TSA officer approached. What do we got? Unknown, Ben said. Atlas is alerting, aggressively. The mother dropped to her knees to comfort the girl, who had begun to sob. It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay. The dog's just scared, she whispered, though her eyes told a different story. A gate agent stepped forward. If the dog's alerting, we have to pause boarding. You need to clear this now. Ben nodded, radioed his supervisor. Code yellow. I need a private screening area. Possible object of interest on minor. The words felt heavy. He hated involving kids. But protocol was protocol. Inside the security room, a glass-walled chamber off the main corridor, the family sat side by side on a bench while 3 officers combed through their belongings. Luggage, cleared. Clothing, nothing. Passports, clean. Recently renewed. Even Atlas, now calmer but still pacing, kept returning to the teddy bear, circling it, then whining. Ben bent down beside the girl. What's his name? She sniffled. His name is Charlie. He's a good bear, huh? She nodded, her fingers digging into Charlie's neck. I know it's scary, but I just need to borrow him for a second. She clutched tighter. No, please don't. Mommy said never let go. The mother flinched. Sweetie, it's okay. Just for a moment, okay? Just let the nice officer check him. Ben's heart tightened. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just a scared kid. There was panic behind those eyes. The girl looked like someone had told her that letting go meant losing everything. With trembling hands, she handed over the bear. Atlas was instantly at attention, sniffing around, the bear's torso then stopping, pawing at the seam along the bottom. Ben turned it over. The stitching was clumsy, uneven. like someone had sewn it shut in a hurry. He pulled out a small blade. The mother whispered, "Wait, what are you?" The seam tore with a gentle tug. Inside the stuffing was something cold, hard, and rectangular. Ben's breath caught. A USB drive. Silence. No. One moved for a moment. The second officer, Morales, raised an eyebrow. "Well, it's not C4. Ben slipped the USB into a secured evidence pouch. "Tech team's on the way," he said. "Don't touch anything until we scan it." The father buried his face in his hands. The mother sat frozen, her fingers white, from gripping the bench. The little girl just stared at Atlas, and then she said softly, "He's not a bad dog." Ben turned. The girl wiped her cheek. "He's not barking at us," she said. "He's trying to tell you something." The room fell quiet again. Atlas laid down by the bear. His tail thumped once. Outside, airport life carried on. Boarding calls, rolling suitcases, gate changes. But in that small glass room, the world had narrowed to one question. What the hell was on that drive? For a few moments, the only sound in the glass-walled screening room was the hum of fluorescent lights and the slow, methodical breaths of Atlas now laying beside the disemboweled teddy bear. The USB drive sat sealed in a transparent evidence pouch, placed carefully on the metal table between the agents and the McAllister family. The parents hadn't said a word in minutes. The little girl curled into her mother's side, her unicorn backpack pressed tightly against her knees. TSA agent Ben Cortez stood by the door, arms crossed, heart pounding slower now, but still wary. He had seen his dog alert before, but this one felt different. Atlas hadn't reacted with aggression. It had been urgency, a kind of desperation. The door buzzed, and in stepped a younger agent with a navy hoodie under his security vest. "Digital forensics here," he said, flashing his badge. Ben handed him the pouch. "Be gentle. We found this hidden in a child's teddy bear. The dog zeroed in on it." The tech's eyebrows shot up. "You think it's malware?" "I don't know what it is," Ben said. "That's why you're here." The young man slid the USB into a dedicated offline laptop, the kind used for air-gapped scans of sensitive data. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Behind him, the mother whispered something in Spanish to her husband. He didn't reply. He just rubbed his temples and kept his eyes on the floor. The little girl looked up suddenly and pointed at Atlas. "Is he gonna get in trouble?" Ben knelt down. "No, sweetheart, he did something really good today." She smiled faintly, and for the first time Ben noticed how tired she looked. Not the usual travel exhaustion. Deep, tired. The kind you don't sleep off in a hotel. The ow. Tech's fingers flew over the keyboard. After a few clicks, his face went pale. Okay, this is not what I expected." Ben stepped closer. "What are we looking at?" "It's encrypted, but the front folder isn't," the tech said. "There's a bunch of .mp4 files and some PDFs, nothing named, all time-stamped from the past 2 months." He opened one of the videos. The footage was grainy, handheld, shot through a dirty car window. A group of people, men, women, some kids, stood in what looked like a warehouse. The camera zoomed in on a man shouting in Spanish at a crying woman. Another video showed a van pulling into an alley. Inside were people handcuffed together, including what looked like a boy no older than 10. The tech clicked on a document labeled intakerutas.pdf. It showed lists of names, dates, and what looked like flight information. Beside each, origin, destination, and codes Ben didn't understand. But one name caught his eye. Maria Gonzalez, Miami to Brussels, July 14th. Ben looked at the mother. Her eyes filled with tears the moment she saw the screen. "Who is she?" he asked. The mother closed her eyes. "Mi prima," she whispered. "My cousin. They took her 2 months ago. We never saw her again." Ben looked back at the screen. One of the final entries read, McAllister, 2. Adults, 1 child. New. York to Madrid, today. He turned to the tech. "Get DHS on the line, now." Outside the room, the airport was still humming. Flight announcements, fast food smells, the click of high heels on tile. Inside, the McAllister family sat silently while more agents arrived. A federal officer in a plain suit and earpiece entered, gave Ben a sharp nod, and closed the door behind him. "I'm Special Agent Halverson, Homeland Security." He glanced at the family, then to Ben. "Walk me through it." Ben explained everything: the dog's alert, the teddy bear, the USB, the encrypted files. Halverson listened without interrupting, his expression stone. Then he turned to the father. "Mr. McAllister, is that even your real name?" The man looked at his wife. She gave the smallest of nods. "No," he said quietly. "It's not." Halverson pulled out a chair, flipped open a notepad. "Start talking." The truth unraveled slowly. The man's real name was Esteban Morales, his wife Rosa, their daughter Camila. 3 months ago, Esteban had been working as an IT contractor for a European shipping company with U.S. branches. In reviewing internal systems, he stumbled upon encrypted records that didn't match any customer logs. When he traced the files, he realized they were coded documents tied to human transport manifests. Illegal ones. He printed copies, saved files, told a supervisor he was concerned. Days later, that supervisor was found dead in what police called a robbery gone wrong. That night, Esteban's apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen, except his work laptop. That's when he knew. Rosa sewed the USB into Camilla's bear. They packed up and began moving. New names, fake documents, always one step ahead. The only goal, get to Spain, where Rosa's uncle had connections in law enforcement and could protect them. "But we had to get out clean," Esteban said. "We couldn't risk going to American authorities. We didn't know who was part of it." "And the bear?" Ben asked. "It was Camilla's idea," Rosa said, stroking her daughter's hair. "She never let it go. Never let it out of her arms. It became our vault. Until today," Esteban added. "Until your dog." He looked down at Atlas, now resting peacefully near the corner. "Until he saved us." Halverson didn't say a word. He stood, checked his phone, and gave a single nod. "A protection detail is on the way. You won't be on that flight." Rosa exhaled sharply and broke into quiet sobs. Camilla finally let go of her mother's hand and walked over to Atlas. She bent down and hugged him, whispering something into his ear. Ben couldn't hear the words. But Atlas's tail gave one quiet wag. Back in the terminal, the incident at Gate 47 had already become a rumor. A drug bust, a bomb scare. Someone said the kid had a weapon. Others said it was a false alarm. The flight was delayed but eventually took off, without the McAllister family. Ben sat on a bench near the TSA break room, sipping bad coffee, his mind spinning. Atlas sat beside him, now calm. Ben looked down at the dog and rubbed behind his ear. "You knew. Somehow you just knew." Atlas leaned into his hand, eyes closed. Maybe the old instincts hadn't dulled after all. Maybe they'd just evolved. And maybe, just maybe, the best officers didn't wear a badge. They wore fur, barked at danger, and trusted their nose when no one else could. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the high windows of the Homeland Security satellite office in Queens. The building was quiet. Soundproofed halls, secured doors, and that faint smell of government-grade coffee and printer toner. Agent Ben Cortez stood outside an interrogation room, coffee in one hand, Atlas's leash in the other. Inside, behind the glass, Esteban and Rosa sat across from 2 federal agents. Camilla wasn't there. She was being cared for in a separate family-safe unit, coloring quietly with crayons and animal crackers beside a child trauma counselor. Her teddy bear, now restitched, sat beside her. Ben watched them for a long moment, then looked down at Atlas. "You don't even know what you did," he muttered. "But you saved a little girl's whole world." Atlas let out a soft chuff, tail gently thudding on the tile floor. The door opened behind them. Special Agent Halverson stepped out, rubbing his temple. He looked exhausted. His tie was loose, sleeves rolled up, his eyes shadowed with the weight of something big. He nodded at Ben. "You were right about the USB," he said. "We decrypted the rest. It's worse than we thought." Ben followed him into the secure digital analysis room. The monitor on the wall showed a spreadsheet filled with data. Names, cities, timestamps, airline info, and codes. Lots of codes. "Some of this goes back 3 years, Halverson explained. "Dozens of names we've never seen. Kids, families, mostly undocumented. They vanish after their arrival point." Ben squinted at one of the lines. "Destination LAX. Disposition cleared. Handler ID R98-7. Halverson pointed to a second screen. Video footage. Low quality. Grainy. A van parked at the edge of a cargo loading zone. People escorted off. Under the cover of darkness, no uniforms, no markings. The smugglers aren't just using land routes, Halverson said. They're embedded in commercial flight systems. Baggage handlers, corrupt customs officers, even staff at off-site warehouses. These people don't even pass through the main terminal." Ben's jaw clenched. "And the McAllisters, sorry. The Morales family, they were going to be taken?" Halverson nodded grimly. "Their flight to Madrid was just a cover. The plan was to redirect them mid-transit, separate the child, disappear the parents, and scrub their ID trail. Camilla would have ended up in Eastern Europe within 48 hours. Ben stared at the screen. His stomach turned. "They had no idea," Halverson said. "They thought Spain was safety. They never realized the traffickers were using that promise to reroute them into the same hell they were running from." Across the building, Rosa Morales sat with an agent and a Spanish translator. Her hands trembled as she recounted the timeline. Her cousin Maria had disappeared after being offered a hospitality job through a recruitment company. When they lost contact with her, Esteban started digging. When he found files connecting the logistics company to a list of clients, he confronted his supervisor. Within 72 hours, he and his wife were in hiding. "We were going to turn it in," she whispered, voice breaking. "But when the police didn't believe us and someone started following Camilla at school, we panicked." The agent leaned forward. "Why didn't you come to us sooner?" Rosa shook her head. "We didn't know who to trust. The files said there were U.S. contacts. Your badge, it didn't mean anything anymore." Ben stood in the hallway with Halverson later that afternoon, as agents moved in and out of secured doors, copying files, confirming names, building a case that could span multiple countries. "FBI's involved now," Halverson said. "Interpol too. This might trigger a congressional subcommittee if it hits the right desks." Ben stared through the glass wall at Atlas, who had curled up in a patch of sun near the entrance. "He never even blinked," Ben said. "Just went for the bear like it had a bomb inside." Halverson gave a dry laugh. "In a way it did." Then he looked at Ben more seriously. "We don't know what exactly the dog sensed. Could have been a trace chemical on the stitching, or maybe he picked up on stress cues from the girl. But whatever it was, he caught something no machine or human could." Ben nodded slowly. "You think the Morales family is safe now?" "They'll be relocated, put under witness protection, but their lives will never go back to normal." "Yeah," Ben said. "Neither will Camilla's." That evening, Ben stopped by the family holding quarters, bringing Atlas with him. Camilla ran up the moment the door opened. "Charlie's okay," she said proudly, holding up the patched-up bear. "They fixed him." Ben smiled. "He looks good." Rosa rose from the couch, her eyes softer but still red. "They told us we'll be moved to a safe house by tomorrow." "Good," Ben said. "You'll have a detail with you every step." Esteban came over and extended a hand. "I owe you everything. Both of you." Ben shook it. "You owe Atlas. He's the one who didn't back down." Camila knelt in front of the dog. "You're the bravest hero I ever met," she whispered, wrapping her arms around his neck. Atlas licked her cheek once, then sat calmly, as if he knew. Later, walking through the dark parking garage toward his patrol vehicle, Ben paused beside Atlas's crate. "You know," he said, glancing at the dog. They're going to write a report, put you up for some medal or commendation, maybe a press release. Atlas tilted his head. Ben smiled. But I know you didn't do it for that. You just knew. Somehow. He looked up at the ceiling, exhaled. You ever wonder how many people like them are walking past us every day, hiding in plain sight? Atlas didn't move. But Ben felt the answer. Too many. And maybe, just maybe, this was only the beginning. The conference room inside the DHS office was dim, its only light coming from a projection screen flickering with the digital footage. Silence filled the space as the second video loaded. No one reached for their coffee, no one took notes, everyone just watched. Ben Cortez stood against the back wall, arms folded tightly, Atlas laying quietly beside him. The screen showed a dingy storage facility somewhere along the East Coast. An unmarked white van rolled into frame. A man in a high-vis vest opened the back. Inside, 6 people, eyes wide, cuffed at the wrists. One girl, maybe 10, clutched a purple blanket. The timestamp read, 06:15, 3:44 a.m. Then came the voice. Unload the women first. IDs are in the blue folder. Don't scratch them up. It was recorded through what sounded like a cell phone mic, grainy, distant but clear enough to understand what was happening. When the clip ended, no one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Special Agent Halverson turned toward the room. That was recorded just 3 months ago, he said. In a facility less than 15 miles from Newark Liberty Airport. A low gasp escaped one of the younger agents seated near the table. Halverson pointed to the next folder. The USB contained 62 videos and 78 documents, including falsified employment contracts, forged passports, and what appear to be internal emails from the logistics company Esteban worked for. They've been laundering people through cargo flights and fake transfer programs for years. We estimate over 200 victims, and that's a conservative number. Ben swallowed hard. The next clip opened. This one was dated 6 weeks prior. It showed a cramped room with cinderblock walls. A man sat in front of a laptop, nervously looking over his shoulder. His face was partially lit by the screen's glow. It was Esteban. He was speaking softly into the camera. If you're seeing this, it means they've either found us or we're still running. My name is Esteban Morales. I worked in IT for Transglobal Express Logistics. I found a subdirectory buried in their international routing software, an entire trafficking ledger hidden behind dummy manifests. These people aren't just smugglers, they're connected. Airports, shipping ports, law enforcement in some places. They erased my co-worker, Luis, like he never existed. They'll do it to us too. Esteban looked behind him as if hearing a noise. They're using children as cover, families. If anything happens to me, you'll find this drive inside my daughter's bear. Please, believe her. Believe the dog. Whatever it took to get this to you, it was for the truth. The screen faded to black. A beat passed. Then someone whispered, Jesus. Later that evening, Ben sat in a side office with Atlas at his feet, scrolling through the last files. He wasn't supposed to. This part of the case had officially been handed over to federal task forces, but something about it wouldn't let go. He clicked open a still image from one of the folders, a scanned copy of a school ID badge. The name read, Maya Tran, age 9. She was listed as scheduled for relocation. Ben stared at her smile, frozen in time. It reminded him of Camilla. Why? Her? He muttered. He checked the manifest again. Her flight, JFK, LAX, Manila. Then he noticed something. The handler ID listed on Maya's entry was R98-7, the same code from the earlier list. He did a quick search of the ID across all files in the folder. 14 matches. All children. All between 6 and 10 years old. All with the same destination tags. All handled by R98-7. He grabbed his phone and dialed Halverson. You still in the building? Ben asked. Barely. What's up? I think we found a pattern. Within the hour, they were back in the digital forensics room. Ben clicked through each profile. Same routes, same false escort details, similar ages. This isn't random, Ben said. They're running a specific group. Age-controlled, girl-heavy. It's organized to look like family travel, but when you line up the data, they're moving product like cargo. Halvorsen looked grim. That handler ID, we think it's tied to a shell staffing company registered in Delaware. But it's a front. Whoever's running it might be operating out of a warehouse just outside JFK. Ben leaned back, jaw tight. You think they're still active? Halvorsen nodded. I think they're planning another shipment within the week. We've already alerted ICE and the NYPD, but it's your dog's alert that cracked this open. Ben glanced down at Atlas, who was still awake, ears twitching at every electronic beep in the room. He felt something, Ben said quietly. Something no one else saw. By the next morning, a federal operation was underway. Ben was called, and not just to support, but to lead the K-9 sweep at a remote cargo terminal near Hangar 19 at JFK. Atlas was fitted with his vest. The sun had barely risen. The air smelled like cold metal and jet fuel. The staging area buzzed with motion. Federal agents, K-9 units, airport security. In the distance, a dull roar echoed as another early flight took off. Ben knelt beside Atlas, checking his harness. You ready, partner? Atlas let out a soft bark. Focused. Calm. Halvorsen approached, slipping on gloves. If they're moving anyone today, they'll be in that warehouse or the vehicles lined up next to it. We go quiet, we go clean. No leaks. Ben nodded. Understood. Inside the warehouse, it didn't take long. Atlas didn't bark this time. He froze. Nose to the ground, he stalked forward, then sat, his alert signal. Ben stepped forward, opened a crate. Inside were 3 backpacks, all with toys inside, all fitted with tracking beacons stitched beneath the linings. Nearby, agents discovered a locked office containing 2 burner phones, a satellite modem, and a printer still warm. The biggest discovery? A list of names, half of which matched entries on Esteban's decrypted USB. They had just caught the tail end of the next planned transport. Outside, under the open sky, Ben took a deep breath. Atlas sat beside him, wind ruffling his fur. The mission had gone clean. No resistance, no shots fired, but the emotional cost hung in the air like jet exhaust. Without that dog, Halvorsen said as he joined him, those kids would have disappeared into another country by Tuesday. Ben didn't reply. He looked out over the tarmac, then down at Atlas. How do we explain to the world, he asked softly, that it took a dog to see what no one else would? Halvorsen gave a quiet laugh. Maybe we don't have to. Maybe. The fact that we stopped it is enough. Ben wasn't so sure, but he gave Atlas a pat on the side anyway. Good boy, he whispered. Let's go home. The news didn't make headlines. Not really. There was a quiet press release from the Department of Homeland Security 2 days later. Just a few lines about an interrupted trafficking attempt and a coordinated federal effort at JFK Airport. No names, no details. No hint that a 6-year-old girl with a teddy bear or a German shepherd named Atlas had anything to do with it. And that was exactly how the government wanted it. But inside the tight circles of federal law enforcement, word had spread. They weren't just talking about the case. They were talking about the dog. Back at the K-9 training facility in Queens, Ben Cortez stood in the middle of the obstacle course, watching Atlas sprint through the agility ladder like he was born for it. Sunlight shimmered off his fur. Every movement was smooth, focused. Even now, Ben couldn't believe what they'd just lived through. He had worked with 4 other dogs in his 13-year career. They were loyal, skilled, dependable. But Atlas was different. He wasn't just reacting to a scent. He was reading people, and that scared Ben in a way he wasn't ready to admit. Cortez, called a voice from across the field. Ben turned to see Officer Mason jogging over, a file folder in hand. He handed it over. What's this? Ben asked. Request, from upstairs. They want you to brief the interagency task force next week in D.C. They're calling you the handler who caught the silent alarm. Ben scoffed. Wasn't me. I know that, Mason said with a grin, pointing at Atlas. But he doesn't have clearance. Ben tucked the file under his arm and knelt next to the German shepherd, scratching behind his ear. "You ready for a road trip, buddy?" Atlas licked his cheek in reply. That same afternoon, in a protected safe house just outside Yonkers, Rosa Morales stood in the tiny backyard, helping Camilla blow bubbles. The sky was clear for once, a rare autumn day that felt like a gift. Camilla giggled as a cluster of bubbles floated toward the power lines. She still carried Charlie, the bear, even though the stuffing had been replaced and the original fabric patched. Her connection to that little toy remained sacred. Inside the safe house, Esteban sat across from a young agent in jeans and a hoodie. They were going over the same names again, tracing connections from one branch of the network to another. Every name he recognized tightened his throat. "How long until we can leave this place?" Esteban asked. The agent hesitated. "Protection. Orders are being filed. But until the operation is shut down globally, you're still a high-risk target." "Especially you." Esteban sighed. "I didn't want to be a hero, I just wanted to make it home." The agent leaned forward. "You are home. You're safe. But the world you helped expose, it's bigger than this country, bigger than logistics." Esteban nodded slowly. "I know." Meanwhile, Ben sat alone in his apartment that evening, scrolling through internal reports on his tablet. He had a beer in one hand, Atlas snoozing at his feet. The TV was on but muted, some old detective drama rerun, playing in the background. He opened the latest file from DHS, an updated suspect list connected to the trafficking network. Same airports, same shell companies, same handler IDs. Then one name made him freeze. Luis Cortez. The file noted, contractor ID unknown, believed deceased, last known affiliation, Transglobal Logistics. Ben set down the beer slowly. Luis, his cousin. They had grown up together in Queens, joined the academy the same year. But Luis had dropped off the map 5 years ago. Rumors said he left the force. Others said something darker. Ben had stopped asking. Now he knew why. He wasn't just a name in the files. He had been inside the network, either as a victim or worse. Ben leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Was Luis the whistleblower Esteban had mentioned, or had he been part of it? Either way, the answer now had weight. And it wasn't just about the Morales family anymore. It was personal. The following week, Ben and Atlas traveled to D.C. for a closed-door task force summit. There were federal agents, prosecutors, customs officials, even a couple of high-ranking military advisors. They didn't ask for a PowerPoint. They asked for the story. So Ben told it. He described Atlas's alert in the terminal. The bear. The USB, the family, the data files, the operation outside Hangar 19. But when someone asked, "How did the dog know?" Ben didn't answer right away. He looked down at Atlas, seated beside him. "Dogs like Atlas," Ben said slowly. "They're trained to find threats, but this wasn't about explosives or drugs. This was about instinct. He saw something in that child that we didn't. He smelled fear, maybe trauma. But I think he just knew she was in trouble." There was a long pause in the room. Then someone from the back murmured, "Sometimes the best agents don't wear a badge." When they returned to New York, Ben was pulled aside by Halverson outside the K9 facility. "You said Luis Cortez was your cousin," the agent began. Ben tensed. "Yeah. Why?" Halverson handed him a printed document. "You'll want to read this." It was a DHS briefing report, summarizing fragments of video recovered from a separate storage drive tied to the trafficking ring. One of the files, time-stamped and watermarked, showed a grainy interior office. A man in uniform sat at a desk. He was thin, bearded, nervous. Ben's heart skipped. It was Luis. He was alive, at least when the video was recorded. "They made me delete the logs. If anyone finds this, tell Ben I'm sorry. I didn't know how deep it went. They said I'd be protecting people. That it was just a relocation service, but they lied. Ben stared at the screen, his mouth dry. Atlas leaned in beside him, sensing the tension. "Where is this footage from?" Ben asked quietly. "A facility in Montreal," Halverson replied. "We're tracing flight records and warehouse logs now, but Ben, we think your cousin may have been held against his will, or worse. He might have tried to get out and got buried for it." Ben nodded slowly. The mission was no longer just about the Morales family, or a heroic K9. It was about uncovering every last layer of the system that nearly swallowed them all. And now, it was family. That night, as the sun dipped behind the Queen's skyline, Ben stood in his driveway watching Atlas sniff through fallen leaves. The air was crisp. The kind of cold that hinted winter was just around the corner. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a new patch. K9 Division, National Integrity Task Force. He crouched beside Atlas and clipped it gently to the dog's harness. "You ready?" "For what comes next?" he asked. Atlas looked up at him. One wag of the tail. 2 months later, snow had started to fall across upstate New York. Not the soft kind that makes kids run outside to build snowmen, but the heavy, silent kind that blanketed roads, slowed traffic, and made you think twice before stepping out, without gloves. Ben Cortez leaned on the wooden porch railing of the small cabin DHS had provided him for a few weeks of rest. Beside him, Atlas lay with his nose tucked beneath his paw, a thin dusting of snow gathering across his thick coat. The assignment was over. The task force had wrapped the operation they called Route Clean. Over 40 suspects indicted, 3 trafficking warehouses shut down, a dozen shell companies frozen. International coordination was ongoing, and while no one believed they had dismantled the entire network, one thing was clear: Atlas had stopped a flight that was never supposed to land, and a 6-year-old girl got her life back. Camila Morales was now living in a quiet suburb under a new name. She went to school like any other kid. Her mother, Rosa, worked part-time at a community center. Her father, Esteban, was under federal protection, preparing to testify in an international hearing scheduled for the spring. Ben had received a postcard last week, a drawing from Camilla. It showed a big brown dog with a pink collar and a tiny girl holding a bear. The caption read in blocky crayon letters, "Atlas is the bravest of all." Ben had pinned it to the fridge. One afternoon, Ben got the call he didn't expect. It was from the Canadian Border Task Force. They had found traces of Luis, a security camera clip. Less than 20 seconds, but it was clear. He was alive as of 6 weeks ago, held, working in a covert facility near Montreal, believed to be under the control of the same criminal network. They were now organizing a quiet extraction. Ben hung up and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. For a long time he had told himself Luis had either vanished by choice or fallen too deep to pull back. But now he knew. Luis had tried to blow the whistle, and like Esteban, he was punished for it. Ben felt Atlas press against his leg, sensing his emotion. He looked down and smiled faintly. "You saved one family," he whispered. "Maybe we can save mine, too." Weeks passed. Ben returned to active duty, but this time with a new assignment: lead canine handler for Homeland's new Rescue Gate program, training dogs to identify victims of trauma, not just threats. Atlas became a legend. His photo was framed in 3 field offices. A child therapy center in Maryland requested a print for their wall. Canine trainers from as far as Texas called to ask about his behavior, his instincts, his alert. But to Atlas, none of that mattered. He still only cared about 2 things: the next assignment and the person at the end of his leash. One morning in Niouaus, late January, Ben stood in front of a group of new recruits, young handlers, many fresh out of police academy. Behind him, Atlas sat proudly, watching each movement. Ben nodded toward the dog. "Let me tell you something," he said. This dog didn't sniff out drugs. He didn't find explosives. What he found was fear. A child's silent scream. A family on the edge. He found what none of us could see. And he didn't stop barking until someone listened. He paused. "And that," he said, voice steady, is what real courage looks like. That weekend, Ben visited a quiet memorial park in Queens, not for the fallen, but for the forgotten. He placed a flower at a blank headstone near the fence line, for Luis, and for every child who never made it off the plane. Later, as the sun began to set over the neighborhood skyline, Ben sat on the porch, with Atlas again, this time wrapped in a flannel blanket, a coffee mug warm in his hands. He didn't speak for a while, just watched the sky turn orange over the tree line. Then he said softly, "You know, buddy, I used to think heroes were the ones with badges, the ones with ranks, medals, names in the papers." He reached down and scratched Atlas gently behind the ear. "But sometimes, heroes have paws." Atlas leaned against him, content. Life lesson. Final words to the audience. Sometimes life doesn't warn you before it throws you into the fire. Sometimes the people in danger don't look like victims, and the ones trying to help don't wear capes or give speeches. They bark, they persist, they protect, they don't ask for praise. This story isn't just about a heroic dog. It's about listening to what isn't being said, paying attention to what's easily overlooked, and realizing that the smallest signals can save lives. So the next time your instincts whisper something's wrong, don't ignore it, because even a bark can be a cry for justice. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals, where we celebrate compassion, loyalty, and the heroes who walk on four legs.